Have you ever created an aquascape and you spent hours on making this thing and you maintain it week after week for months or even years just for life to get in the way and it end up looking like this? Right? Life got in the way for me just like it does for everyone, and now my aquascape is looking not so hot. It has cyanobacteria, the dwarf hairgrass is slowly dying, it has hard water stains, and I'm not in love with it anymore. And so you may be in the same situation, and something that you can do is a complete reset, right? This is where you take everything out, you clean it up, and you start from scratch. You make a new aquascape. You make something that you're proud of again, that your fish will also love. Now, the first thing I do whenever I'm resetting an aquarium to make sure I do it properly without harming my fish is I like to take out all the hardscape and the larger plant. And then I take out some of the water and I put it in a specimen container. You can use a Tupperware or even another tank. And I catch all the fish and I put them in this other container so I can completely gut out this tank. Now I have in this tank, I have chili rasboras and I have some cherry shrimp in here, and they actually weren't too difficult to catch because this was a smaller aquarium and I drained most of the water. They were fairly easy to catch. And chili rasboras, they didn't seem extremely skittish, so I was able to catch them pretty easily. But once you get all the hardscape out and you drain the water, then it's going to be time to dump this stuff out. Now, I just dump it out all in a bucket. I have sand mixed with dirt and then mixed with all that dwarf hairgrass. I just threw it all out into that bucket. Now, I am going to be reusing some of this, right? And so if you're resetting an aquarium, you got to make sure that you have something to jumpstart your cycle. So I'm going to hit on that in a second. But let's talk about how you clean your tank. Now, there's tons of ways on how you clean the tank. Personally, I like one or two options. I either use the melamine sponge that I'm using here. This works great at getting all the algae and dirt and grime and biofilm out. But if you got really stubborn stains, either hard water stains or really stubborn algae, you can use a razor blade. So a combination of those two will normally fix or clear up any problems you have in terms of just cleaning your tank. Once you have your tank clean, right, you don't want to use any chemicals or anything like that, but once your tank is clean, then you have a clean slate and you can kind of start putting things together. But how do you make sure that you put it together without having to go through the nitrogen cycle all over again? Now, if you have a filter on your tank, well, you just reuse that filter and you're done. But for me, this is a nano tank that is also a filterless tank. There's no filter. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to use a lot of the old sand that has a lot of that good bacteria in it. But at the same time, I'm using brand new sand so that I can get the look that I want to go with, right? I didn't want white sand anymore. I wanted a more natural looking sand so that my aquarium would look the way I want it to look. But it still has some of the good bacteria that it needs. So I kind of piled up the, I guess, old sand in the middle, and it's mixed with dirt for the plants I'm going to plant in here as well. Now, I'm only using a little bit of dirt because if you use too much dirt, that's when you're going to have algae issues and even cyanobacteria really starts to develop when there's a lot of organics in the water column. Now, I think the other thing you need to be aware of whenever you're resetting the tank is what got in the way and what made it difficult to maintain this tank. And for me, what made it really difficult was the type of plants that I put in this tank, right? I was using dwarf hairgrass, and they're normally a more demanding plant, which means if you're not on top of your maintenance, well, then they're not going to look so hot. And so I wanted a more low maintenance tank. So if life does get in the way, my tank just won't die and look terrible. So I'm going to use a more, I guess, simple approach to my aquascaping and a more, I guess, low-tech plant. Now here I'm using Soreyu stone. I'm doing a very simple setup. I have a larger stone kind of propped up on a medium-sized stone, kind of sticking out of the water because I think it looks really, really good. And then I'm using these smaller stones just as detail stones to give it some depth, to get it some texture, and to tie everything together. And I think it looks really good from a hardscape perspective now. Now, as far as plants, I'm only using one type of plant, and that's cryptocorin. I have about 20 tanks in my garage, so I took about, I don't know, 6 or 7 bunches of cryptocorin, and I'm going to put them in this aquarium here. Now, the way I prep my plants before I plant them is I like to trim the roots. This does 2 things. One, it helps with stimulate root growth. And the other thing that it does is it looks better, right? If you try to replant a plant with really long roots, some of those roots are going to stick out and it's just not going to look good. So it's better if you trim them. Now, what I'm also doing is I'm getting the cryptocorin that are larger, and I'm putting them towards the back, and I'm doing the smaller cryptocorin, and I'm planting them towards the front. Now, this is a great plant. This is a really good low maintenance plant. So if you ran into the same issue I did where your plants weren't looking too hot because you had a more high maintenance type of plant, well, then maybe you can switch to something like this. Cryptocorin is really low maintenance. They don't need highlight. They don't need a ton of CO2. They're really just not a very demanding plant, and they're gonna thrive in kind of a hands-off style that I personally enjoy in fish keeping. And this is how it looks, guys. It's looking really good. The Soreyu stone, the color of the sand, the cryptocorin, it's all looking great. Now, I also want to have some backup plans to kind of absorb some of the excess nutrients that will build up over time. And so to do this, instead of planting a ton of plants underwater, I'm going to add some house plants to grow out of the tank. Now here I have some pothos and then another viney plant that I'm not sure the name of. And it looks all right. It doesn't look as good as it will in maybe about a month because the leaves of those viney plants are kind of facing all over the place. And that's because I kind of moved it around whenever I'm rescaping here. And they'll slowly turn back towards the light, and it will look better as time goes. Now, whenever you're filling up your tank, one thing that you can do to make sure your water stays crystal clear is you can actually siphon out water as you're refilling. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm refilling the water, and I'm kind of siphoning out, all the dirt that got loose, and then any of the excess sand that kind of floats, because sometimes some of the sand floats, and this does wonders at making sure that your aquarium is crystal clear from the get-go. Now I am adding a little bit more sand because some of the white sand kind of, got spread throughout a little bit whenever I first initially started filling up the water. So I'm kind of smoothing everything out and making it look the way I want it to look. But this tank is looking amazing, guys. Now, the next thing that you got to remember whenever you're resetting a tank is you kind of do want to make sure it sits for a little bit, right? Because you don't want to harm your fish, right? You probably already jump-started the cycle, but this is brand new water. And so you do want to use conditioner, but you also want to see how different your water is from what it was before, right? And so you want to check temperature, but you also want to check pH. So I have this pH pin, and I think it ends at maybe 6.9 to 6.95. And then you want to check, well, what was it before? And as I was checking the water that's with my chili rasboras and my shrimp, I think the pH pin ended about 6.8 to 6.85, somewhere along those lines, which meant we were pretty close, but there was some difference. So I'm going to drip acclimate the fish for maybe about 15 to 20 minutes. And so if you don't have a drip kit, I encourage you to get one. It's just an airline tubing with some extra accessory parts, a little valve. And you just have one end going into the aquarium and one end going to wherever your fish are. And you just let it slowly drip for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, however long it may be, depending on how different your water is and how sensitive your fish are. But another really cool tip that you guys can use is look at your pest snails that are in the new tank, right? If you see pest snails trying to actively escape your tank, that means your water is not ready for life. But if you see them moving around like they are here and just they don't seem bothered by the water, then chances are your aquarium is A-okay. But now it's time to add fish. They've been drip acclimating for about 20 minutes. Here's the chili ras boars. They're looking really good. You can see the shrimp going as well. Now, it doesn't stop here. Whenever you reset your tank, you also want to take a look at your fish. Right? Do you see any fish that are just hanging out at the bottom or just hanging out at the top? Are they gasping for air? Are they flashing? Meaning, are they rubbing themselves against the sand or leaves as a way to itch themselves? You know, you want to look at your fish. This is part of resetting a tank to make sure everything's okay. Are your fish acting normally? And you kind of want to make sure you do this for the first couple weeks. Now, the other thing I do whenever I'm resetting a tank is I add something called Bacter AE. And now this is typically used with shrimp, but it helps create biofilm and other microflora. And I just use a tiny bit and I just sprinkle it over the top, and then I kind of mix it all around with my finger. Now, this is really good if you have nano fish or shrimp, as it creates that biofilm and microflora that shrimp would like to eat, and also really tiny organisms like to eat as well. Now, another thing you can do to help balance your aquarium is add some floating plants. And then after that is just keep an eye out for it for the next couple weeks. And if you do all these things, you're going to have a very successful tank reset. Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.